So my name is Rella Abernathy. I'm a senior ecologist with the City of Boulder Climate Initiatives Department and the Nature-Based Solutions team. And I don't know about you guys, but I am still buzzing with the excitement of all those great talks and what we learned this morning. So this afternoon we're going to be focusing on how we take this knowledge that we're learning in all these different ways and in our own ways as we're learning on our own and transform that into action. So we know it's critical that we heal the earth and create as much safe habitat as we can for pollinators and all other life. And I know that many of us are overwhelmed with the challenges facing the planet, and it's easy to feel like you really can't make a difference. But we can, and the most important thing we can do is to get our hands in the soil and help create thriving habitat for insects, birds, wildlife, and ourselves. And to do that at scale, it's necessary to right the wrongs that we've done to the land and to each other, because these are inseparable issues, and everyone has to be a part of that change. And though lots of people may think they can't lead this change because they aren't trained in this area or they aren't natural leaders, each of us can learn and contribute in some way. So when you look at events like this, you know, there are people from government agencies, researchers, horticulturists, beekeepers, volunteers from nonprofits and home gardeners, you know, all different kinds of people. But there's also a lot of people that aren't here, and these types of events don't reach everybody. And a lot of the people who aren't reached by these types of events, you know, don't feel like they have any power and aren't in positions of power. So it's really important that we reach people from all walks of life, and these panelists are going to show you how some people are doing that. So I'm really excited to share the inspirational stories with you of all these people. None of them have been trained in entomology or horticulture formally, though whenever I hear them speak, they are experts in these areas. And they also bring a life of experience, different types of experiences in the ways that they take knowledge and inspire others to take action. So, and they also bring so much joy and hope. These people are the reason I get up in the morning and try every day. So, I think they're going to bring you as much hope and inspiration as they do me.
No pressure.
No pressure. Okay, and so you guys all have your mics. And so I'm just going to ask everybody some questions that you get to know them a little bit, and then we'll hurry and we'll have time for questions at the end for you. So I'm going to start with Tiffany Boyd, who is a retired teacher. She taught for almost 30 years, but instead of taking it easy and having some leisure in her retirement, she started Classrooms for Climate Action, which is a 501c3. Tiff's the executive director. So how on earth did you get into this work, and why is this your passion?
Thanks, Rella. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So as an elementary school teacher for 30 years, my main passion is elevating student voices to get involved in issues in their community. And in 2019, as many of you know, Greta Thunberg kind of lit literally a fire under the adult world around climate action and youth-led voices around climate action. So I was kind of coupling my inspiration to continue to bring youth voices to whatever is impacting their future with a lot of this momentum around Greta Thunberg coming to the United States, and came to Denver and had a chance to speak in Denver. I don't know if any of you were there. So I would say that my passion is for youth voice to be engaged in making sure that kids have a voice in their future, right? So climate and pollinator issues, all of these are very integrated, of course. And so over the past, we just kind of jumped in with a group of retired teachers, helping reach out to other teachers in the classroom, those of you who are classroom teachers or no classroom teachers know that they are at their capacity of what they are able to do. And so as retired teachers, and then also partnering with lots of CU students in University of Colorado, helping extend the capacity of classroom teachers beyond what they're able to do. And so, so we help teachers integrate climate action into what they're already teaching. It's not an add-on. It's looking at local climate phenomenon around them. And we've worked closely with Sonia Walquez-Lewis and the People Pollinator Network and really helped to lend student voices to a lot of pollinator advocacy issues. So, yeah.
Okay. So, Andrea. Like Tiff, you are now working in an entirely new area after retiring from the medical profession. And I think you're probably putting in more hours per week than a full-time job working on your passion for native plants and pollinators. So, can you tell us about the Pollinator Advocate Program you created and how it's been successful in providing local community members with free, in-depth training around building and maintaining pollinator habitat? And what are the ingredients for success?
All right. So where do I start with this? I'm going to start with the last part of the question, which is what I think are ingredients for success. And I think ingredients for success are measured by how the people who come to do the work, how the people who show up to do the work are able to reach their goals. So what I wanted to create in the Pollinator Advocate Program was a way for community members to achieve what I was able to achieve. I came to this field knowing really not very much. The Bee Chicas had put up an installation of a native bee house at a public library, and I saw it. And I said, native bees? There's a difference between native bees? Well, what's the other kind of bee? Like, I learned from the bottom up. And I thought, if I'm able to do this, certainly there are other people in the community who could do this. So I was the proverbial one chapter ahead of everybody else, right? And I started this program based upon a neighborhood effort to bring pollinator habitat to areas that were really ignored, right? There was, it was sandy, there was nothing happening there. I thought, we could grow plants there. We could do something for pollinators there. The work that Dr. Harlan Patch told us about today, this is a perfect area. There's enough pollinators to bring them back to life, but not so many that we can say we're really supporting pollinators. So I got into it, and I felt super motivated because it turned out my neighbors were interested. And the neighbors would come, and that's how I started seeing that it was successful, because they came back. And I think the reason they came back was because I was pretty honest. And I said, look, I'm learning as I go. Here's what I'm reading. You can read it too. Here's what I'm doing. I think you can do it too. And they brought their knowledge, and it became something they offered, something I offered, and then it grew into a public program. And there's a lot of steps in between there that we could talk about some other time, but I measure success based upon the fact that people show up, people return, and people are now doing the work in their own neighborhoods. And the work is finally building connected habitats, creating corridors for these native insects to be able to travel through and hopefully even increase their numbers. That's the goal, where they can survive and thrive, as well as the community members who are surviving and thriving by communicating with each other.
That's great. Okay, Efraín, I have a question for you. Okay, I first met you as an entomologist and artist. They're an incredible group at the CU Environmental Center called FLOWS, which stands for, I have to always look at it because I forget, Foundations for Leaders Organizing for Water and Sustainability. And what FLOWS does is they support BIPOC, immigrant, low-income, LGBTQ+, and disabled members of the community and help them grow into becoming real leaders for environmental and social justice. And then I got to know you when Efraín was on our committee for this insect art show, Little Creatures. And I could see through his art and photography just how much his love of nature shines in his work, and you'll see some of his photos in these slides. So how does nature inspire you to connect and share its wonders within your community?
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about my passions, specifically the little creatures out there. What inspires me about nature to connect with the community was the question, correct? Mm-hmm. I think I get a lot of inspiration from nature, specifically on the diversity, not just, biodiversity, but the differences in all the creatures that are out there. And I think that reflects a lot in people. And I like to see those two parallels and combine them and connect with people that way, because nature has a lot of different adaptations, a lot of different colors, shapes, sizes, and I like to associate that with people as well and connect with people in that way. And obviously, bugs are a great way to do it. It always sparks communication. It always sparks questions. It always sparks people wondering what something is for. And I think I'm able to bring into perspective a lot of those parallels into humans, with like migration. Migration is a beautiful thing. It's a natural thing. I myself am an immigrant. I'm originally from Mexico. So I like to bring that into perspective as well, that migration is a beautiful thing. You have the monarchs. There's dragonflies. We were talking earlier about the miller moths. Whales love to migrate. So I think bringing those perspectives into bringing environmental work into the community, I think is integral to promote the wellness of everyone in the community, and including the little creatures. I think it's important to let people know that, as Rella was saying earlier, there's some of us that might not have the best access to formal education or formal training, as some people here in the room. And I think it's important to let them know that there are people like us that are not considered experts, that are actually, trying to connect with the community and let them know that, all you need is curiosity. All you need is wonder. All you need is awe. All you need is just have an open mind and learn about these organisms that they can teach us so much. They teach us a lot about resilience. Beetles crash into windows and they just get up and fly again. So it's that aspect that I really want to let people know, resilience is everywhere. And if these bugs can, crash into windows, butterflies fly with damaged wings after a praying mantis or a bird try to eat them, that, we also can learn from them and grow and share our wisdom mutually, and in this realm specifically with the community, I'm able to really connect with them and let them know that they're not out to get you. These wasps are not just gonna out to sting you. The bees are not just looking to sting someone. The spider is minding its own business. It's probably is more scared of you than you are of it. And specifically with spiders, they're not pollinators, but they're the ones that kind of led me into connecting with people. They're the ones that were not. They're the ones that a lot of people least like. So coming from growing up as an immigrant and all this and that, I kind of took shelter with nature, and it was an innate wanting to learn about it. And from there, I was able to, leverage it and use it as a way to become a resource for my communities. And I think that has also been very monumental in my wanting to elevate my communities and let them know that because of my curiosity, it led me to wanting to share it with others. And because of that, I've met with amazing people and amazing organizations that are out to create resources and to create a better way of living for everyone, not just humans, but also, the little creatures.
It's beautiful, Efraín. Okay, Faith. Faith is a high school art teacher. She's a fine artist that exhibits often. She creates incredibly beautiful illustrations. In fact, that big illustration that you saw in the revolving slides with all the different solutions to all the different problems with pollinators and all types of land, Faith made that illustration. And she's also an activist artist. She has a deep knowledge of pollinators, and in her art, every single detail in plants and insects will be accurate. And so, Faith, how does your curiosity drive the work you create?
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I would say, I love how Tiffany mentioned it earlier, especially as an educator. Some of our goals are to help students find their voices, but also like, how do we find our voices? And as a trained fine artist, if I should call myself that, graduating, I think I graduated my undergrad about 10 years ago. So there's this drive to create art, but like, what's the artwork actually about? And so early work that I did, and I've shown in a gallery context for a lot of years, but my early work was a lot of autobiographical stuff, or I was processing like things that were happening to me in my life. And like, that was great. But maybe felt a little bit selfish, and like, I didn't really feel like the work that I was creating had much urgency. And as I was finding along the way, and learning about things like, there are native bees, like what? Like honeybees, bumblebees. I was like, there's more? That kind of unlocked a door for me, I think, for actually starting to see my artwork as a tool for teaching people. I mean, I clearly have an education background, but kind of marrying those two things together. And so as I began my own journey for starting to learn more about pollinators and the urgency from like the environmental perspective and all the things that are combined with climate change and, you know, all that overwhelming stuff that Rella mentioned earlier, that again, like kind of opened up a door for me. So I started to see like, as I was learning these tidbits, it felt like the more I kept going down this hole, the more interesting and more complex, but like also like how beautifully connected things seem to be. So I sort of decided to use the curiosity of that learning method to drive like the topics that I made my artwork about and that I presented. And then I've also tried to use like social media as like a two-part process of like, yes, it's documenting the work that I'm creating and all my shameless plugs for come to my art show. But it's another space for sharing that process along the way of like, what am I learning and what am I doing with it? And what's the challenge that I've presented to myself of how do I go from what I learned to creating something new and interesting and original? And for almost all the pieces that I create, it's about sort of connecting those relationships. So I believe the piece that's up on this thing right behind me was actually inspired by Doug Tolmay's work around host plants. And so after watching a YouTube video on that, this was a collaboration with a dear friend, Wynn Reynolds, because we had an exhibition about a year ago. And so we were thinking about that relationship of the host plants, and this one's based off of the goldenrod and the asteroid moth. And so we were, you know, like, how do we show that? How do we celebrate that? How do we, as artists, use all these sorts of different materials and aspects? We really wanted to like use the floor and the ceiling. And so our challenge for ourselves was to kind of use this as a space to highlight the importance of host plants and those keystone species. And so it's really that, like, what am I passionate about, and how do I create work that shows that in a way that, like, you feel it a little bit more than just the statistics, and then bring people along for the journey.
Thanks, Erin. And you can see, when those of you who are at the Little Creatures art exhibit have seen some of the slides going around, and there's that kind of prism-looking painting that has the insects. Faith was a partner in making that exhibit happen and created that artwork. And we also, when I met Faith, we met to talk about what we wanted to try to convey to the public. She's worked at the Endangered Species Coalition for a long time. And she made this incredible artwork on fragmentation that we're purchasing, and it will be at the CU Museum. So you'll all have a chance to come see it. It is incredibly beautiful and important, and hits you right in the gut. Okay, Tiff, let's come back to you, because you teachers are getting things done in retirement. And what kind of skill, and Faith has more energy, I think, than all of us on the panel combined. So what kinds of skills do teachers and educators have to engage and lead the community in climate action and pollinator protection? Because I don't think teachers necessarily think of themselves as activists.
Actually, most teachers, I think, do.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. So teachers who are working in the classroom are superheroes, for sure. Thank you, Faith. And those of you who are teachers and no teachers, so their capes are very much flowing out there for people to see their superhero actions. So retired teachers are superheroes plus time. So that's why we've really engaged with retired teachers, because they understand how to elevate youth voices. They understand making something age appropriate. They understand integration of curriculum. They understand the intersectionality of so many things. As an elementary teacher, I'm very much a generalist, but I do understand the intersectionality of climate, with protecting native spaces, with all of the things that are happening in our communities now. And I feel like, so we have kind of a cadre of retired teachers and, like I was mentioning earlier, college students who have some time to help classroom teachers who are very, very limited on their time. So I would say that educators understand the unique positionality of youth voice, and that oftentimes youth voice isn't elevated to the level where it's really important that they're having a voice in shaping their community and their future. So oftentimes teachers truly understand that kids offer a unique perspective on solutions, which we've found a lot. Those of you who work with kids know that oftentimes adults get kind of stuck, and then kids will say, try it this way. And you're like, oh, wow, for sure, right? So really getting kids to be active problem solvers in the issues that we're facing is something that is obviously a lifelong passion of mine. And so getting kids to think out of the box, which their thinking is already out of the box, but also because it is their future and they deserve a voice, getting them in front of decision makers. And so, speaking truth to power and getting the science of, getting kids to understand the science, but then it doesn't just end in the classroom. So what we really do is we provide that bridge to civic engagement, right? So getting kids in front of policymakers, in front of legislators with their solutions, and really truly speaking truth to power and saying the decision you're about to make about how you're managing this open space affects me. And, I deserve for you to be thinking about greenhouse gas reductions and preserving native pollinator habitat, to thinking about how do we manage our invasive species, how do we fund emergency response, how do we think about fire mitigation, flood mitigation. So climate and habitat are so intersectional. So when we help teachers think about how climate fits in, it fits in absolutely everywhere, sadly, into the curriculum. So it doesn't matter if it's a unit on let's say persuasive writing or any kind of civic engagement or anything with science. It's very easy to integrate, and teachers have the skills to see those intersections. And I think that's one of the things that makes educators just natural activists.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, they're doing some great work, and a lot of it's hands-on, where the kids are designing habitat spaces, and getting the plants in, learning about what it takes long-term to manage them, and also getting the neighborhood involved. So teaching the kids to be little community organizers, and you can't start soon enough. Speaking of which, when we're talking about community organizers, Andrea, I actually think of you as a plant whisperer. She can get anything. She can get any seed to germinate, plants to grow, rare species to come into urban flower gardens.
Luck.
Yeah, and where plants go, so does insects and all other life. And so, How does your connection with Mother Earth inspire you to create the Pollinator Advocate Program in the way that you have?
Well, thank you for that compliment. Thank you for bringing up our dear Mother Earth, because we do sometimes forget to bring her up first and foremost. How does my connection with Mother Earth affect how I interact with the Pollinator Advocacy Program?
And teach it the way you do.
Well, I believe that the less we do, the more we can gain in a way. I like to start, and let me explain that. I like to start off, and I think and there's a lot of PAs in the audience today. Shout out to y'all.
Yeah, stand up, PAs. We're taking over.
Yeah, we got a lot of them here today. There they are in the back, so thank you all, and thank everyone. So, Pollinator Advocate, and it's a program that I started a few years back along with the Butterfly Pavilion. The Butterfly Pavilion then kind of started focusing more on the Denver Thornton area, and I started focusing more on the Boulder area. So, I have this confidence that if people can learn how to just get some assessment skills, to go into their own yard, their own parks in their own neighborhoods, and even look on those little strips of, habitat or non-habitat that exist between the street and the sidewalk, and just gain some confidence about what they're looking at, to be able to assess it and say, what do I see? What am I seeing? And also, very importantly, what am I not seeing? When I look at the earth and I look at what's growing around me, and I looked at all those little parks that were just really weren't growing anything, I saw the possibility for change. And I also trust that if I can figure out a way to work in harmony with the Great Mother, that I can also trust that I can learn how to work in harmony with my neighbors and with community members, and that they in turn can learn to work with each other, just like having confidence in the plants and the insects knowing how to work with each other. The teachers bring this to our youth. I want to bring it to our older people. And by older, I mean anyone over 19, so whoops, caught myself there. But I really mean it. And also the other place where I really take pride in bringing it to are specifically our mobile home communities, our Native and Indigenous cultures, where too often we end up in silos that are separate from one another, when what we are really all connected by is what is growing in the earth, what is growing in our neighborhoods, what's growing in your park. So I guess sort of in a nutshell, it's having a confidence in your ability and to learn, to take the knowledge you learn from people who are presenting at this conference, and try not to just go and bury yourself in learning more knowledge, because the temptation is, oh God, now I have a lot I don't know about moths. Oh my God, all these other pollinators, and now this stuff with modules and oh geez, right? But instead, learn one, do one, teach one. You learn something about some plants and how to grow them, how to interact with the soil, do it. Learn a little bit more about it, do it. Encourage a neighbor to do it. Encourage a friend to do it. And that's how you not only grow pollinator habitat networks, but you grow human and community networks.
Excellent. Told you guys that they were inspirational. Okay, so Efraín, we've talked a lot about the kind of vulnerability it takes to put yourself out there, and especially learning new things. And what role does vulnerability play in your work with arthropods and your intersection with your communities?
Certainly, that one is very real. I feel very vulnerable being here, and I think a huge component to vulnerability is visibility. And I put a picture of myself when I was younger because that's little me is the one that kind of guides me into doing all the things that I do and connecting with my inner child, and having that inner child lead me into these spaces, into being vulnerable and into sharing my story, allows me to connect with like, as I keep saying, with people, and beyond just, as you were saying, there's always something to learn, but you have to be able to share it, and I think being able to share it does require some vulnerability. And why I decided to do photography is because of that. We're visual creatures. We're visual animals. We like to see things. We like to be able to observe things. And photography was a great outlet for me. I taught myself pretty much. It was super DIY. It was my cell phone. And then from there, it transitioned into like an actual camera. So from that, I was able to connect with organizations like here at the Botanic Gardens, the Butterfly Pavilion, the DMNS. And then from there, I eventually connected with Rella. But I think vulnerability, specifically for me, allows me to keep myself in perspective and keep the perspectives of those that share similar backgrounds to mine, and allowing myself to be that voice to bring to light some of the issues that other people might not be aware of. And one of those is being in this space. I was speaking with Rella last week about it and how I felt very insecure, and there was a lot of self-doubt, and I'm not formally trained. I don't even have my bachelor's, but I am very passionate about insects and arthropods and spiders and the little creatures. I am such a nerd. I like learn about them, and I like to share with my community, and I think that by itself is very important to be able to sit here and talk about it with so many people that are like trained and experts and have gone to this and that, and I'm over here like, well, this is me. I'm doing this too, but in my own way, and I think that's very important to let people know that there is no right or wrong way to do this. As long as as long as we're here and showing that you have that spark, that curiosity that you want to share, that's more than enough. And that's something I need to remind myself every day. That I would like to, but it's not necessary for me to like go above and beyond and go to school and get a bachelor's. That as long as I'm sharing it with my community and letting them know how they can also make an impact, I think is very important. And as I keep saying, bugs are a great way because they're always conversation starters for sure.
And Faith, you've collaborated directly with scientists like Dr. David Inouye and Paul Caradonna from Rumble or Rocky Mountain Biological Laboratory, our biology laboratory. So how did these, when you spend the whole summer with these people who are some of the world's top scientists working on pollinators and native plant communities, how does that influence, your process in your work?
Well, first off, I just think collaboration is so hugely important as a space that I have found, helps me recognize that I don't know everything, and really leans into other experts, especially if I'm willing to be vulnerable and email and be like, hi, I'm an artist, can I come hang out with you? And usually they say yes. Sometimes they don't respond to you, and that is okay. But I think collaboration has been a huge piece of this path. I actually got connected to both of those researchers through work that I had said yes to with Endangered Species Coalition, and then that led to Dr. Inouye was on their board, and they were like, hey, you're both in Colorado. And I'm like, are you? Can I drive to you? And I have the summer off. And so that sort of opens up opportunities by just, saying yes and or forging your own opportunities. So that has certainly influenced me. I have found that research papers. Can we talk about research papers? I think they're wonderful and beautiful, and I value what they are, but there's such a structure, and the barrier to entry on research papers, like, I think genuinely box out a huge portion of the community. Like, we have got to move beyond that format as the main method of communication for pollinators. So let's snap to that. So with that in mind, like, even though I read the papers of both of these researchers up here, when I showed up in Rumble, I just said, show me everything that you do. And I followed them around in the field. I caught bumblebees. I looked at them and they were adorable. But like, also I learned the methods that, even though I had read that same methodology in a very dense paragraph, being in the field, like, it was the story, it was the experience, it was the urgency, and it was all the things that they didn't put in the paper, because the paper is such a structured approach that has all these formatting requirements. And so I got to know also, like, research that was happening that, you know, they will probably put in a paper 5 or 6 or 7 years from now once they've collected enough information. So it also felt more timely. And so kind of being a sponge to just say yes to all these opportunities helped me kind of really find more of the emotion behind what was happening in their work. And then, just to give you a little insight into what you see up on the screen now, this was in my second year of going back to Rumble to continue a collaboration with Caradana's team. The bumblebee life cycle was something, as part of my curiosity, I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, they don't just have honeycombs like the honeybees. So learning about an entirely new, in my mind, structure of the way an insect could have a life cycle and how that was so different from the other ones that I learned, I was like, I want to make an illustration that really captures this. And so I should have the first version of the illustration up here, which is totally inaccurate. But that went on a journey over the 2 years of working with Caradana's team of like, how do we visualize this and making it comprehensible? So every slice of that pie, if you will, is a month of the year. And so it's trying to show that like cyclical nature of an entire calendar year. So starting at like, 10 o'clock on your view, it's like the beginning of when they start, you know, creating their nest space or foraging for their nest space and how that grows. And so we went through like multiple versions of this illustration to make it more comprehensible and more accurate, like even to the degree that we finally were like, all right, let's not just do bumblebee, let's pick a bumblebee. So it's a flavifrons for those that like really need to know. And then, you know, like next level of nerdery was like, I'm gonna do flowers. And so we like sorted through Caradana's data to look at like which specific flowers was the flavifrons landing on at like each month of the calendar. And we did it based on the data. But you know, it's similar to how I'm like, we got to move beyond the papers. We also have to move beyond the art gallery because in a similar way, that's a pretty narrow audience as well. And so we continue that collaboration to think about what other format could it look like, and that's where we created that coloring page. I mean, maybe the most difficult coloring page ever invented because I know it's really tiny. But so we were like, well, how can we have this image live a greater, longer life that can travel around as a free digital download on my website, and also as something that could be used in more publications versus like the watercolor rendering. And so trying to find like multiple methods and multiple audiences is some of our approach for that continued collaboration.
Okay, so we still have quite a bit of time, so we have time for questions. But one thing I wanted to do is if you guys have any more interest in seeing like Faith's work, Efraín's work, learning more about classrooms for climate action, or how to get in contact with Andrea, I'm going to put up slides with their information, and you can take photographs. So, I forgot to put this slide up, Faith. She makes these beautiful bumblebee nesting boxes that are just obviously works of art. They're just incredible. I'll let you look at those for a second.
I can say a couple notes about them. I mean, the curiosity of like, how do I build something for another creature was another aspect of curiosity. And I think this is another good example of how I've been challenging myself to like, all right, it's a beautiful box and I want to incentivize people in their gardens to make some spaces for pollinators because it's beautiful cyanotype and wood burning. But then like, how many people can actually purchase a handmade box? Plus all the questions that the people who bought a box started peppering me with, and I was like, oh no, now I've put myself in a position where I have to educate them. So I also make zines that go kind of oftentimes like alongside the work I make. So it's another like free, accessible tool that's used. So anyone who ends up purchasing one of my pollinator boxes gets a zine, but also like this zine could partner with anyone's like 2-chamber nesting box if they choose to. And sometimes I'll art drop those. I'll just put them around town for free, just for fun. Just for someone to be like, what is this about? A pollinator box.
And here's Faith's contact information. She's done so many different types of art too, and different topics over the years. It's really fun to go through her site. And while we're going through that, I just have a question for you, Andrea, as I'm going to give people time to take pictures. You know, there's a lot of horticultural programs of different types and gardening programs. And I feel, and maybe I'm a little biased, but I feel like Pollinator Advocates is a different kind of horticultural program. It's a very long, intensive program with a lot of hands-on work and learning how to be an organizer. And so can you just talk a little bit about that as I, share some of this information?
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about that. There are a lot of wonderful educational pieces out there, and I consume them as often as I can, and I encourage you to search, to look, watch YouTubes. What I felt in starting this work as a community organizer around building habitat for native habitat for our pollinators was that I could see that going down that black hole almost of gaining knowledge was paralyzing me. And it was paralyzing people who I was associated with. Well, did you watch this? Did you learn that? Did you read this? What about this article? What about this study? And I think what I really wanted to do with the Pollinator Advocacy Program was that whole concept of learn it and do it. So you not only get classroom lectures from people who are here today. So they come in and they do guest lectures for the program. I teach some classes. But we go out into habitat spaces at least once a week, and we learn hands-on. Here's what compost looks like. Here's what compost smells like. Here's how you use it. Here's how you plant. Here's how you transplant. And you can see these connections building between people. I'll tell you, may I tell just like a minute-long story or less than that?
And talk about the site assessment tool and the.
Okay.
And one thing I think you need to say is that when they finish the program and they graduate after they do their site assessment, you get to do your own plant kit. This is all free, paid for by the city, and go out to Harlequin's Gardens and do your custom plant kit for your site. How cool is that?
So I created a tool, and when I say I created, I just want you to understand. I created based upon every single thing that each of you have taught me, either as pollinator advocate students, as biologists, as entomologists. So I created, in other words, what I did was synthesize everything y'all taught me, and I put it in this tool called an assessment tool. And what it teaches you is how to look at any space you go into and say, what value could this possibly be bringing to pollinators? Is it a place for habitat? Is it just dry ground? Is it really? Or could this become a place where they nest? So you take this assessment tool in there, and then it has a grid that says, okay, here's where I'm at, and here's what I need to add. And it's based upon, do you have bare ground? Do you have grasses? Do you have forbs? Do you have shrubs? Are you wealthy enough or live in an upper class enough neighborhood to have trees, right? So the goal is to assess what you have and then figure out what you need in years to come and in weeks to come. And part of that was built upon the fact that I worked with people who were going to Harlequins and they'd always come back with 30 penstemon. And I'd be like, why did you just get penstemon? They're like, they're so pretty. I'm like, I know, but. So I wanted people to really be able to evaluate their space and to be able to come back and say, I have enough damn penstemon. Now I am going to go buy some other stuff, right? And so there's that. And then I forgot what you asked me to talk
Really,
about it.
really to teach people to engage and,
Yeah,
and go on and take what they learned and engage other people to action.
Yeah, so then the sort of grand finale is that then these people suffer through drawing off their own habitat and garden space, and then me evaluating it. And it takes hours, much too long. I take much too long, but each person builds a habitat that hopefully connects to another type of habitat within their neighborhood and within their HOA. And there are pollinator advocates who have graduated, and they have now gone on to do tremendous things within their communities. Seed banks, pollinator habitats that are within HOAs where there were just ornamental flowers before, and now it's habitat, bee hotels, all kinds of things that they're doing throughout their communities. So I think it's unique in that people are learning to do hands-on, but encouraged to take it outside of their own garden, to have the confidence to talk to other people and build community out of it. So for lack of scaring anyone away, you become somewhat of a community activist at the end of the program.
Yeah, excellent.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry for the long explanation.
Okay, so we have time for questions. We have. Does anybody have a question?
I have just a comment for Tiffany. I really applaud your connecting climate and habitat, because I think one of the things that we're lacking in so much education, particularly with children, is we teach them all kinds of pieces, and we don't ever teach them to connect them together. And I think your approach to that is really important.
Yeah, thanks. I agree. I feel like the intersectionality of so many of the things that we're facing as a species right now are quite clear for a lot of educators, but being able to teach it in a way that makes sense and let people understand that it is all interrelated and we cannot address just one thing. We have to address all things. And I feel like that's super important for young people to understand as well, for sure.
Are you getting pushback from parents who are climate deniers?
Okay, so if you guys didn't hear that, Pam asked if Tiffany were getting pushback from parents who are climate deniers.
Yeah, I was just chatting with somebody about this over lunch. So I work in the Boulder Valley School District, so we're quite siloed and blue and agree that climate change is real. So no, but I'm also a part of a network of climate educators around the country and across the world, and some of my colleagues in Florida do not experience the same sort of ease. And back to the intersectionality, right? We're not pulling out climate as this kind of partisan issue. It's tying the science to the civic engagement. And if people want to be science deniers, that's a whole nother level of discussion for sure. But the short answer is we're lucky and no pushback.
Harlan?
Question, so the people you work with, why do they come to you? What are they looking for?
Can you repeat the question, Andrea?
Dr. Patch just asked, the people who come to the Pollinator Advocacy Program, who are they and what are they looking for? And I'm always so interested in that every year. So the people who come for different reasons. Some people come because they've been lifelong gardeners and they want to learn specifically about native plants. Other people come because they're just curious. I have a biologist from a city who came because he said, I want to build a corridor from Boulder to Longmont. I was like, wow. So I get everyone from sort of newbie, people who have never gardened before. I get people who are interested in native plants. And then I get a good section of people who just politically want to support pollinators. And they learned a lot of that from the honeybee movement that came out early on and brought forth the importance. The honeybee movement really brought forth the importance of taking care of our pollinators, and it's evolved into something bigger now, but that's who I get a lot of, and I get honeybee keepers, and so I get all kinds of people and I get some who are super shy, and in their application they say, I will never speak to another person about this. And I'm like, challenge. I will get you talking to people. And then I get other people who come in and they're like so active in their community already and they can't wait to share the word, and everybody in between. What I don't get enough of are indigenous peoples. I don't get enough Chicanos or Mexicanos coming to the program. So I'm bringing it to them, to their communities, because they're too busy to come and spend a whole summer learning this stuff. So my goal is, and what's happening now, is I'm breaking it into little bite-sized chunks to take it to people who are working all day. So.
And there's much more interest than there's capacity, because we can only put through like 20 people a year. But, we had over 60 or close to 70 applicants.
80.
Yeah, we get a lot of people interest, and it's a big commitment from people. They have to commit to going to multiple classroom sessions and volunteer for many, many hours in the field and go on hikes, so they can see what plants look like in nature and in natural areas.
And they have to give me their firstborn.
That's right.
It's kind of weird. One goal I'll just say is to get the big thing here was that when I started creating these habitat spaces, I didn't have enough volunteers to show up regularly. So these folks sign a contract, if you will, that says, I'll come back and volunteer. And I have their address and phone number.
Go ahead, in the glasses.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot, Efraín, but I just wonder if I wonder what your community gives back to you when you're out there and you're giving so much of your pearl to them as, like you said, resilience, abundance, connection. What do they give back to you?
Thank you for asking that. The question was me sharing my story and my passion about bugs and arthropods with the community. What do I get from the community, right? I get so much. I love engaging with people and teaching them things that they otherwise would overlook. So just seeing their expressions and the things that they share with me, their stories, I think keeps pushing me to keep wanting to expand on educating the community, specifically about arthropods, but on other things as interdisciplinary things that are connected to, immigration, climate change, local politics, even from like teaching people how important it is to reuse the butter Tupperware, things like that. It brings me a lot of joy. Is basically what I get out of it. I get out a lot of igniting people's curiosity. I think for me is mainly what I go after. I'm a fairly simple guy. I don't ask for a lot. So as long as I'm able to talk and share my photos or my work or my life, and people are willing to listen, and that they feel comfortable enough and vulnerable enough to share their stories with me, is more than enough for me. Thank you.
Rella, Scott has a question. Oh, sorry, Scott.
I've got a question for you, Rella.
Uh-huh.
How have you been able to sort of permeate climate action and maybe respect for wildlife in a city department to other city departments?
Okay, so this is Scott Sievers, who's a huge naturalist in his own right. So we were so excited when we saw that he had applied to become a pollinator advocate. And you were asking how in my work I can work with other departments across the city on these issues.
Because some of those, again, a lot of those departments, and I work in a city,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of those departments are working from years of siloed activities, and it's hard to break down those barriers.
Yeah, and so it is, cities are bureaucratic and siloed. I've been the integrated pest management coordinator for Boulder for 14 years, and our policy is an ecosystems management policy. So there was already this kind of thinking among our staff and our departments. And of course, we have so much open space land. We have I hear estimates between 46 and 47,000 acres that are all types of land all the way up into the mountain areas. So we have staff, who are ecologists who are already thinking about things this way. But one thing that's happened within the last year is our climate initiatives department, so we have an entire department that just works on climate action, started a nature-based solutions group. So I had been before that in comprehensive planning because we looked at this kind of ecosystem management as long-range planning. But that has opened up a whole new world because we have a whole team, and they're here today, most of them, under the leadership of an incredible visionary thinker, Brett Kincairn, and our director, Jonathan Cohen, where we're interested in systems change. And our community has trusted us enough to vote a $6.5 million a year climate tax that allows us to do the work we do. So we can afford to do things like put on a little creature show with 13 events and work and hire Andrea to help us do the Pollinator Advocates program, work with Faith, work with Classrooms for Climate Action, work with Efraín. So it gives us this ability to work. We work with Jessica Hilzer, who worked with CU for many years and works with Sammy Ramsey, has been consulting with us and guiding us as we really work to expand this work. And, we are silo, but we're doing more. We're going to be doing more of that in the years to come. We have Darren Davidson doing the training. She's done with some Denver staff, too, on sustainable landscapes. So we are really working to work more within the city and to do demonstration projects on things like rainwater harvesting. Christine Johnson, another one of our Pollinator Advocate graduates, is becoming an expert on and learning about. And then, we have several of our staff here today, our horticulture team, some of our operations staff, and we're just all trying to learn as much as we can together and support each other in making change.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we're out of time. So you have if you want to talk to any of our panelists after the ending session, feel free to do that, and you have their contact information. And I hope you enjoyed hearing about what they do and their incredible work. As much joy as they brought to me all the years I've been working with them. Thanks.